Good morning, everyone. We're so glad you're here with us. I'd like to introduce Craig Burko, the Director of Membership and Special Projects here at Temple Beth Shalom, who is going to introduce our speaker. And we hope this program for you will be informative. And if you have any questions after the program, you'll contact Craig. But really, it's my pleasure to proceed and introduce Craig Burko. Craig?
Thank you, Mark, very, very much. I'm very appreciative. It's a wonderful day here at Temple Beth Shalom as we continue to bring you informative programs. And in this instance, we have a program that I personally and professionally feel is a valuable subject for families, no matter the age as well. Today's subject is on pre-planning of funeral and cemetery needs. I will tell you that before I introduce our guest speaker, that there is a reason why we're doing this program today. We've all been through a lot these last 2 years. In my opinion, it's now more important than ever that you take seriously end-of-life planning, pre-planning your funeral, pre-planning cemetery needs can absolutely eliminate and reduce stress for loved ones and family when the time comes. It may also guarantee those same family and friends never to have to pay more for those needs no matter what happens with inflation. So we believe this is really a valuable subject, no matter the age, and we hope you enjoy it. I've got a few things that I wanted to share before we introduce our speaker for today. This program, we've titled it Pre-Planning Funeral and Cemetery Needs. My contact information I'll share with you at this moment, as well as at the end of the program. Temple Beth Shalom, our guest speaker, will share about this, but Temple Beth Shalom has a number of cemetery plots in a dedicated cemetery section of Lakeside Memorial. I am the contact here at Temple Beth Shalom for any interest in regard to those cemetery grave sites. My email is craig@tbsmb.org, and my extension is 230 here at Temple Beth Shalom. I wanted to introduce our special guest, Joseph Becerra. Yossi is a family service counselor for Dignity Memorial. He's a man of tremendous knowledge. I just can't imagine how many thousands of people, family, friends, that he's helped in and around our community. He's certainly educated me on a number of things that I didn't know that will benefit my own family, as well as the temple members that I get to share with during the regular temple year. But it gives me great pleasure and honor on behalf of Temple Beth Shalom to introduce Joseph Becerra, a family service counselor for Dignity Memorial. Good morning, Yossi.
Good morning, Craig. As always,
how is that introduction?
Outstanding. I think it's greater than the person you're introducing.
Okay. Well, we appreciate that you're here on behalf of Temple Beth Shalom, and I thank Mark Baranek as well for being here with us. So, listen, our time is valuable for those that will end up listening to this tremendous informative program. I'd love to start off with, perhaps you can share a little bit about who you are, how you got into the profession that you're involved in, and and why it's important with the role that you play. How does it make a difference in the families that you help? So we'd love to first learn, who is Joseph Becerra?
That's a very deep question, Craig. I'll try to answer all of that on one foot. I really appreciate the opportunity of sharing this information with you and the members of your community. Lakeside Memorial Park, which is the specific, facility or location or park that I represent, is one of many locations that the company that I work for, Service Corp International, owns. It is in Doral, in Florida, and we have a very long-standing relationship with Temple Beth Shalom, way before my time, and I'm guessing it's even before your time, Craig. It's
Yes.
Temple Beth Shalom has been connected. It has roots in Lakeside Memorial Park for a really long time. Let's face it, it's not an easy conversation to have, but it's an important one to have. It's the inevitable, but at the same time, it's part of life, and Jewish philosophy, whether you're on one side of the spectrum or the other side of the spectrum, on level of observance, it really doesn't matter. We know how sacred end of life is, and how we have to give our parents and great grandparents and anyone who we love the proper send off. The idea of today's meeting obviously is about planning ahead. Who I am. I was, in a nutshell, my family comes from Peru. We migrated in 1984. I studied here. I learned graduated from Hebrew Academy in Miami Beach. Went off to, believe it or not, a rabbinical college in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. Came back here, started working in insurance, met and married my wife, started a family, and I started working in this industry on a professional level, I would say about almost 10 years ago. However, as a kid, I did volunteer, and I used to work with the Chevra Kadisha, with the Jewish Sacred Society, washing and preparing bodies before burial, which is a sacred task. And I was involved in that community service for a very long time, even as a 15-year-old, which is not what every 15-year-old is doing, right? And so I made a full circle, and and ended up working in this wonderful task on a professional level. That's really basically, as far as who I am, what I do. I find it to be a service to the community. It's not an easy service. Sometimes it's even, it's a thankless service sometimes, because families are going through such a difficult time. They're going through grief. Now, I deal with families more at a planning level, right? So I'm working usually with families, I would say about 8 out of 10 times I'm working with families when they're planning ahead. This is 10 years, 20 years, 30 years before. But when you establish a relationship with a family where, you're making these very intimate, sacred arrangements with these families in the community, you establish a connection, and the first call they make, even though you've advised them to call the location when death occurs, they call you. So I've received phone calls at 3 a.m. in the morning, and the first time that happened, my wife was, "Hey, who's that?" So, but she soon became very familiar with the lifestyle that we had adopted.
Yeah.
That's a little bit about me.
I wanted to tell you, just to jump in for a bit, is that the reason this subject is so important to me is because I remember when my dad passed away unexpectedly in 1990, and my parents had no pre-plan for funeral or cemetery. And I'll never forget how hard that was on my mom. I was in my early 20s, and I'll never forget how hard that was on my mom and myself My brothers had already left the house. They're building families and their own careers, moved out of state. And I was here to thankfully be with my mom at her side. And I remember sort of traumatically the stress that we were put under, having to deal with that at the time of crisis versus what we're talking about today with this program, and that's pre-plan, with the hope that it would reduce stress for the family and friends of the beloved one that has departed. And, you know, again, this subject is dear to my heart, and, you know, because I've lived it. So when we pre-planned for my mom, I can't tell you what little stress we had, my brothers and I, because we had pre-planned the funeral and cemetery. After my dad had died, we pre-planned for my mom. And you know, even though my mom had passed away as well, it was definitely less traumatic. So, you know, that's why I'm happy we're presenting what we're going to present. And, you know, it's one thing that we certainly, TBS certainly wants to share, that we have an amazing section where Temple Beth Shalom members can have their grave sites and remain there with their families over the years. But this pre-need funeral and cemetery planning is truly important. Yossi,
Yes.
share with us about pre-need funeral, pre-need cemetery. Is there a difference between pre-need funeral and pre-need cemetery? Do they go hand in hand? You know, I want us to break it down to the basic of the basic for those making believe that have never been part of the pre-need process, the planning process. Please.
Absolutely, Craig. Well, first and foremost, thank you for sharing that very personal story, because, you know, I don't just consider you a partner now in doing this for the community. I consider you family. You know, I like to establish lasting relationships with the people that I work with. I do what I do for so many hours in the day. I have to establish the difference between family and those that are not family. And I consider you family, Greg. But thank you for sharing that, because I can't tell you that in the years that I have been doing this, right, not just as a volunteer when I was a kid, but as a professional adult working this. I lost my father in 2016, and believe it or not, you know, he was an old timer. God rest his soul. He did not want to plan ahead. And as good as I am at doing what I do, there was no way I was going to convince that man, because he just didn't want to do it. I love him. I miss him, but I wish he would have listened to me, because it was not difficult. It was very difficult, actually, even as a professional in the industry, because once it hits home, it hits home. You're not a professional anymore. No one's a professional griever. Nobody. It doesn't matter if you're a rabbi who does eulogies, or if you're a person who has lost many people in your family, God forbid. If grief hits home again, you're gonna feel grief. You're gonna be depressed. You're gonna go through all the roller coaster emotions. And if you can have everything ready, if you can have everything planned, nothing can get you ready to grieve. But at the very least, all of that heavy lifting is out of the way. You know, you put it into the hands of professionals who can look at things more objectively and take care of you and help you and take off that load. So I could not agree more with what you said. Your experience, actually, unfortunately, is a common one, where the silver lining is that people will plan as a result of the impact that they had of losing someone, and having to choose caskets and plots, and having to choose whether they're going to do a chapel service or a gravesite service. There are so many details. So thank you for sharing. Having said that, going back to your question about actually getting into the details of the differences in grave and cemetery planning versus funeral and casket planning, and we can categorize it that way, there are two major categories when planning ahead. The first is locking in and securing your property. In this case, for those members in the community of the Temple Beth Shalom community of Miami Beach, you would need to contact Craig, contact the temple, and Craig is the best person to go to because he wears many hats, and one of them is to help families basically and guide them. And you know, Craig, I'm always available for you. We're a team, and guide them basically in choosing their plots so that they don't have to think about this and their children don't have to think about this. A lot of people don't think in those terms, and because this is a very awkward conversation. Let's face it, nobody wants to talk about death, about mortality. So talking about plots and caskets is an awkward conversation, right? I know you said you're recording, but I'm not gonna say anything wrong, Craig. But I'm gonna tell you this: this is not the sexiest job in town, what I do. However, I'll tell you this: it is definitely a job that I am proud of because it is not an easy conversation to have. And I help families kind of open up the dialogue. And basically, you know, I mean, we plan for college for our children. We plan, you know, for God forbid, fire, casualty. We plan, we put insurance in our homes. We put insurance on our cars. We do so many things for things that might happen. This is the inevitable. God never lied to us. This is part of life. It's the circle of life. We are born against our will and we pass away against our will. So let's try to make the right decisions while we're here on this good earth. And one of those decisions is to plan ahead. My mother-in-law, speaking of mother-in-laws, you mentioned, Craig, always says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, which could not ring harder when it comes to these arrangements. So yes, when it comes to planning cemetery and funeral arrangements, as a member, if I were a member today of Temple Beth Shalom and anything that is on this video catches your interest and you say, you know what, that makes logical sense, the first phone call to make is to call Craig. And again, he will provide the information you need. Craig will guide you in choosing the plot. The advantage of choosing your plot is because you will be able to secure, not just for you and your spouse, but perhaps for a child and their spouse, and create a legacy location for your family so that beyond the 120 years that you live on this earth, God willing, you will also be together beyond life on this earth.
And that's also why we have that special section just for Temple Beth Shalom members, so they can stay together.
That's correct. That's correct. Insofar as funeral arrangements, we have had a few meetings with Craig and with Jeff and with the management team at Lakeside Memorial Park. And again, the reason why today we're focusing on Lakeside Memorial Park, but Craig, I'm not sure if Temple Beth Shalom owns any plots in any of our other cemeteries.
No, just Lakeside. Yes.
Lakeside. Well, and that makes sense because Lakeside Memorial Park was established in 1958 by Selma Orid, who was a Holocaust survivor, and she purchased the land, a huge piece of land, when there used to be just cows and horses.
Sure, right.
You remember, Craig,
there was nothing out there surrounding the airport. The only thing out there was maybe probably in the 60s, the country club was starting to be built, like in the late, probably the 60s or early 70s. That was the only thing out there, other than maybe some warehouses.
You're dating yourself, Craig.
There was no Dolphin Mall, I can tell you that. Or no Doral City Place.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing. It's okay. But I'll tell you this, it's been around for a long time, and that's the place. You'll see a lot of families that are well-known, rooted families in Miami, big Jewish families in Miami that have been around for a long time. I mean, I'm not going to throw around names now, but they're very well respected families that chose Lakeside Memorial Park because their roots are in Miami. And so Temple Beth Shalom has had a long relationship, one of the longest relationships with Lakeside Memorial Park. And they you know, Temple Beth Shalom owns a great deal of plots there that, you know, obviously they can help families in the community to secure and plan ahead. As far as the funeral expenses, right? The funeral expenses are you know, professional basic services, dressing and casketing, bathing and handling. All of these items are important, right? A lot of people, unfortunately, back in the day, they used to say, okay, I'm going to choose my plot. And they would choose their plot. They would go home and say, that's it, my arrangements are taken care of. Right. And since this is a very awkward conversation to have, no one asked questions until death occurred. And then they got hit, you know, they got blindsided with huge expenses. We're talking a lot of money.
Right. At the time of crisis is the worst.
Correct, which is the worst time. It's just the worst. It's like adding insult to injury, because, you know, a family's grieving, and now we have a funeral director, you know, funeral team, a staff telling the family, you know, I'm sorry, I know you want to have the service on Wednesday at 2:30 p.m., but you have $7,000 that you have to pay. And the family's just like blindsided because their dad or their mom told them, all my expenses are taken care of. And it was just someone like me wasn't there to guide them, or someone like Craig wasn't there to guide them. Now, Craig has many hats, like I said. He works for Temple Beth Shalom. Me and him are partners. Lakeside and Temple Beth Shalom are partners in helping families plan ahead. These are not easy arrangements to plan ahead. They're very expensive. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. However, we have a very special arrangement with Temple Beth Shalom, where Temple Beth Shalom can provide plots that are thousands of dollars less expensive than what Lakeside would provide for any family that would just walk in. You know, plots, a funeral alone is an average today, okay? Funeral alone is an average today of about $9,000. We have a special plan that, you know, no questions asked. It doesn't really matter to us whether you have a large, massive bank account or you have no money at all. We have a special plan, which is a special arrangement that we have with Temple Beth Shalom, which Craig and I and our management team and Jeff had discussed. And you can get the details from Craig. If you are ready to make your arrangements, and again, that's the big if, right? We're always ready. We should always be ready. I mean, we don't know when we're going to go. We don't know when we're going to make that exit. That's not the way to live. I'm not trying to say, you know, I'm not Debbie Downer here. I'm not trying to be, you know, negative, but I'm trying to be an adult about things, and let's be mature about things. And we just don't know. We live our lives with happiness and joy, and we celebrate as much as we can. And we do simchas and all kinds of things. But we must plan. We must plan, just like we plan everything else.
And may families not need to take advantage of this plan for years to come. But I can tell you the worst regret is, as a parent, is having to leave this stress to a child that remains. And I know.
Correct.
So, you know, I want to know from your experience and the years you've been in this profession, do you see of late, is it the same demographic that is always purchasing pre-need, or is it getting younger over the years? As you know, I do see more, you know, thanks to social media and other creativity. I'm sure your profession has figured out ways to get the messaging out better than it did 20 or 30 years ago. So, you know, I'm wondering, from your experience, is there a younger demographic that is so-called signing on board to pre-need planning than ever before? Or is it about the same age demographic that does pre-need?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So there is a lot of research that has been put into this. We actually have had seminars about it. We are in the baby boomer generation right now, and a lot of the baby boomers are they're in that age range now, baby boomers, right? So the age of my in-laws, my mother, those, and but baby boomers. So to answer your question, because it's a loaded question, it's an excellent question, is it's the last 3 years, because of the pandemic, we have noticed an uptick in younger people thinking about the fragility of life, and therefore they have inquired, and I've actually arranged with young people, single people that are single, people that don't have parents anymore, and they lost their parents at a very young age, and or they lost their parents to the COVID, and now they're by themselves. It doesn't really matter what the background is. I pretty much encountered almost every shape and size. But yes, we have seen an uptick in the last 3 years of younger people in my personal experience. I'm sure that if we did a wider research, we could probably see even bigger numbers. But having said that, the demographic really of what we do is more in the late 60s, 70s. That's when it really begins to kind of, okay, parents, children become grandparents.
Yeah.
That's when it really hits. When someone becomes an orphan, that's when it really hits. It's like, oh, so now I am the patriarch or the matriarch. Now I am the one. Wow. So it begins to kind of sink in, it begins to register, reality begins to set in. And, again, it's kind of like what you went through with your father. I'm sorry to keep going back to that example, but I thank you for sharing that, Craig, because it is a very common example of what happens in my professional experiences. Families come over and, one of the first questions I ask them is, how did you get my number? Well, it's a referral, or why did you call us? Why are you thinking about this? Is someone ill? Right? These are some of the questions we ask. And they will sometimes say, no, we just lost a friend, or our neighbor just passed away, and I went to the service and their kids didn't have any arrangements. It was a mess. And so these experiences that sometimes you get as a side effect, they impact those of us that listen and pay attention. So
yeah, absolutely. That it's I this subject comes up with family and in conversations, and I simply just share with them my story, how the first parent leaving was so traumatic, versus the second parent, which was traumatic as well, but less. It was definitely less long-term stressful, because we had pre-planning that went on for my mom. Yossi, something doing research, I've heard about funeral or final expense insurance. I just wanted to ask you. Someone had mentioned that to me about why can't families simply take out final expense insurance, I guess, versus pre-need planning. So I'm wondering if you can just spend a few minutes in regard to that conversation, please.
absolutely, Craig, I appreciate that question. That's a very good question, actually. Early in my career, it was one of the pushbacks that I received from some of the families, because again, we see it online now, we see it on billboards, we see it everywhere. Sometimes, everything is being advertised. All services are being advertised, whether it's legal services, medical services, everything is advertised now. So final expense insurance, I'm not going to talk bad about insurance. I think that everybody knows what insurance is. It's necessary. It's a necessary evil, to a certain degree. Okay, but I am an insurance agent as well. I am licensed to do what I do. And the reason is because our funeral arrangements are, in fact, when we make a funeral arrangement. So by example, a family comes to Craig and says, Craig, thank you so much for talking to us at the Shabbos table. It was so important to us that you shared that information with us. We want to plan our plots, me and my husband, right? Someone walks over to Craig and says that. Craig says, no problem, reach out to me after Shabbos and we'll talk about that. Sets up the appointment. They lock in and secure the plots. They go and they take a, Craig can call me and says, Yossi, I have a family that wants to go take a look at these plots. Please go take a look at Genesis, Division A, Row 2, plots 40 and 41. No problem. We set up the appointment and I show them the plots. I introduce myself. I show them the plots. These are your plots, Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz, just as an example. And now because they're so well educated, thanks to Craig and myself now about this concept of pre-planning, they say, well, wait a minute. Is this everything? Because that is a very common question I get. Is this everything? Will my kids have to pay anything? I don't want to leave this to my kids, which is the right thing to do as good parents, not to leave that to your kids. That should be the 11th commandment, frankly. Thou shalt not burden thy children, right? But it's the truth. We love our kids. We do so much for them. Once you have kids, you live your life for them, basically, yeah. Right? As parents. And so the best thing you can do is once you make an exit from this world is not leave them that burden, because it's the worst thing. And the grief is already there. The grief is going to be there. We are programmed to overcome the grief eventually, thanks to all the different traditions in Judaism, the Shiva and all those things. These are all important parts of closure. So all of those things are programmed to help us overcome. But if you don't leave everything ready and prepared for your kids, it's just consolidating the grief. Having said that, the family asks, what do I do about my funeral arrangements? Is there anything else that I need to take care of? Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz, you've already made your arrangements of the plots with Craig for Temple Beth Shalom, which was a great choice. You saved a lot of money, and now you get to stay forever with your family and your community. Beyond the simchas that you've shared for years and decades, now you get to be together. The community remains together in life and beyond. Now, the next expense is funeral arrangements, which is the opening and closing of the grave liner. These are all requirements. These are all expenses, and they all add up. So, and these will be burdens to your kids if you don't prearrange them. Now, normally something like that can be very expensive. We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. I'm not saying that it's not going to be thousands of dollars if you make the arrangements through Temple Beth Shalom, but it's going to save you thousands of dollars if you don't do it as a walk-in, as somebody who just walks into Lakeside.
Right.
If you come in and you, correct. If you come in and you have that, as they say, yichus, right? If you have that connection to Temple Beth Shalom, you're going to save money by default, because we have an arrangement with Craig, with Jeff, and with the board over there at Temple Beth Shalom to protect the families.
Right.
Go ahead.
And Yossi, if pre-planning is done, like you share years and years in advance, that's paid off monthly. It doesn't have to be paid in one shot. I remember paying off monthly, and honestly, by the time my mom passed away, hers was completely paid off.
Correct.
That's correct. Everything was done. So, I don't know if we need to get into that subject, but if done years in advance, which I hope is starting to make sense from the 20 or 30 minutes we've been sharing, payments can be monthly, and that way, by the time, God forbid, a loved one passes away, everything is done already as far as cost.
Correct. Now, that's exactly right, Craig. And again, all it takes is just opening up the dialogue and asking the right questions. And I'm so glad we're having this this video and this program, because it's going to, I hope that it helps reach the hearts and minds of your community, and that they, even though it's an awkward conversation to have, they could look at this privately on their own, and they could say, you know what, Craig, I was looking at that video for the 15th time, and I think it makes sense now. It's an awkward conversation to have, but it's the right thing to do. It's the caring and loving thing to do for your family. To answer your question about the differences between pre-need and final expense. So basically, here's the thing, right? I am in the industry. Okay, let's pretend that because it's not pretending, frankly, that the industry, I represent the entire industry. So to a certain degree, it's true, because I am a member, an associate of a company that is the largest conglomerate on this planet when it comes to final expenses, when it comes to end of life planning, which is Service Corp International. So as a result of that, I can tell you that there are a lot of the items that you will plan ahead, such as, like I mentioned, the opening and closing of the grave, which is a service fee, the grave liner, without getting into all the details. Those details can be discussed with Craig and myself once you are ready to get into the nitty gritty and really have a sit down. We will be glad we can set an appointment and talk to each of you individually or as a family, however you wish. We could do it virtually or in person. Having said that, in general, those expenses are locked in. Those items are locked in, and that is the key difference between pre-need and final expense insurance. Final expense insurance, again, I'm not going to demonize any industry or anyone. That's for you to, our listeners are educated, professional families. I guarantee that there's not one person that's going to watch this video who is not educated and capable and intelligent. So I'm sure that all of you will do your research. You'll listen to this video, you'll do your research, and you'll see that what I'm saying is true. When it comes to final expense insurance, they claim that their benefits are flexible. And what that basically means is that they can cover final arrangements and sometimes more. And what that means is basically they have a set amount that they say, okay, this is the amount that you're going to have. If you continue to pay monthly X amount of dollars, you will be basically eligible for this amount of payout, this benefit, if God forbid death occurs. Okay, let's say $10,000. $10,000. Let's say that your expenses at the end, let's say the person took out the final expense insurance today, dies 2 years from now, paid only 24 months of the insurance, and now it's $10,000. Hey, you have $10,000, right? And again, I'm making a very general example because it all depends. Insurance is very, very funny that way. But let's say you get $10,000 now towards your funeral arrangements, and it's like, oh, that's great, because now really my funeral plan, I got a great deal, you know, and I'm gonna pay $9,000. So now I'm getting $1,000 in my pocket. That's the biggest gamble you're gonna be taking. And here's the reason why. Especially nowadays, we're noticing a very, very difficult time right now in history where we're seeing inflation. We're not just talking about it anymore. We're actually seeing it, right? And inflation is a real variable in our lives. It's a real variable. If you look back, you look now, and if you look forward, like a lot of people do actually, you'll see that inflation is real. It's a historical fact. It happens, right? So as a result of that, you have to think about the fact that what the final expense insurance is telling you is you're going to have $10,000. Don't worry. Right. Just keep paying. Keep paying every month and you're going to have $10,000. Well, guess what happens? Let's say the person plans, the average age is, like I said, 70 years and up. Let's say the person lives 20 years. What about 30 years? I just made arrangement for a family, okay, that has a business in Doral, actually. I sat in their office, and the mother is about to turn 100 years old. God bless her. She's a Holocaust survivor. She was just awarded a beautiful award. I wanted to be there. I couldn't be there, but they sent me pictures. And she's a wonderful, wonderful human being, okay? And she's going to turn 100. And the son had taken out final expense insurance. He ended up canceling the plan, lost about $30,000 of his money, because as soon as the policy matures at 100, they lose everything. So it made more sense to lose less and cancel now, and this was something that he wrote with a best friend of his who didn't quite explain everything to him, unfortunately. So that essentially, here's the difference, okay? Just to make it very simple. Pre-need secures and locks in and protects you, not just from the added grief that the kids will go through if these arrangements are not pre-arranged and mapped out for them, okay? Because their minds will not go through the added grief of, what would mom have wanted? Would mom have wanted it this way? Would mom have wanted it that way? Oh my God. And then because they're with so much grief, now they're just paying, losing money.
Right.
I don't care if you have billions of dollars. Why should you pay so much money? Because of the added grief.
And secondly, no matter what happens with inflation, you're locked in.
That's the key right there, Craig. Thank you. That's the key. You're locking in the plan. Yeah. Final expense insurance cannot do that for you. Right. And I'm noticing that there's a lot of people that are now starting to steer back into the pre-planning with the actual industry with us, with us, because they're noticing, and because frankly, we have more people like me that are educating the families, that have a campaign to educate the families about the stark differences between final expense and pre-need.
Yossi, we're gonna close it down. I always promise people no more than 50 minutes.
Yes.
What's the next step? Somebody wants to find out about whether it's pre-planning or Temple Beth Shalom cemetery plots. What's the next step?
Craig, the next step is, once a family has the basic knowledge that this is an actual and real concept, pre-planning, securing a plan with Temple Beth Shalom, then they need to contact you. Provide them with your information.
All right, so let me see if let me put my information
Yes.
up there while you're sharing. Let's see.
So folks, basically, if this is something that you are ready to do, and again, when I say that, I say it loosely because none of us are ready to have this conversation, and we've already elaborated on that. But when you're ready to have a serious conversation, and believe me, this conversation is easier than the conversation when someone passes away. Yeah. That's a much harder conversation. This conversation is a lot easier. Call Craig, reach out to Temple Beth Shalom, ask them about their plots, ask them about the advantage of planning ahead as a member of Temple Beth Shalom. And basically, Craig will help you and guide you to go ahead and choose those plots. And I will absolutely make myself available to assist you and your families and your friends as well through Craig. But it must go through Craig in order for you to basically benefit from the special arrangement that Lakeside Memorial Park has with the community of Temple Beth Shalom. And thank you so much for having me again, Craig.
Yossi, I can't thank you enough. It's been an honor and a pleasure. It's on behalf of Temple Beth Shalom. We're appreciative to you, to your company, and the relationship that we have in helping our congregants. I can hear from your voice, and I know you already, that you absolutely make a difference in the lives of many. And whether you know it or not, you've affected the lives of thousands of families by reducing and eliminating the stress, especially that stress that doesn't have to be left on the children of loved ones that depart unexpectedly. There's nothing worse than a child having to go through this in a time of crisis.
Absolutely.
And what your profession does and what you do with pre-planning funeral and cemetery, it absolutely makes a difference in the lives of men. So I want to thank you. Thank you for being here. And on behalf of Temple Beth Shalom, it's been a pleasure. I thank my colleague, Mark Baranek, as well, our Director of Congregational Engagement. And thank you to those that will view this very informative program. And if you have questions, you can reach me at Temple Beth Shalom, at craig@tbsmb.org, or the phone number here in the temple is 305-538-7231, extension 230. Yossi Becerra from Dignity Memorial, thank you so very much.
My pleasure, Craig. Be well.
Thank you.